And if everything went well, we should be live now.
Yeah.
So, welcome everyone to another episode of Everything Outside Code. On these live streams, or what I call them podcasts, I talk to amazing founders, creators, GTM leaders about their product, how they go to market, interesting lessons, mistakes, and all the things they do that are super difficult but aren't concerned with actually writing code. Typically, we have founders on the other end listening to this. So if you're a founder or you're an engineer looking to go to market, I think you're just in the right place. And today I have a very special guest on the show, Matt. Matt from PureType. I'm going to let Matt do the honors in a bit. But before that, if you have any comments, questions, whatever, just leave them in the comments. We're happy to take shout outs. I mean, I'll shout anyone out either way. But if you have any comments, leave them and I'll take them. If you have questions for either of us, we're happy to answer them. So over to the man of the moment, Matt. How you doing, man? Thanks for coming
Yeah,
on.
good. Thanks. Yeah, thanks very much, William. It's great to be on. And I'll answer that whole tell me about yourself question. So, on a personal note, I'm living in Montreal. I moved from London in the UK just a couple of months ago, at the start of
Mm-hmm.
August. So, I read, William, that you'd moved up to Norway. So, it's nice to see. I think people changing countries, that sort of puts you into a new frame of mind.
Yeah.
So before I was at PureType, I'll go into that in a second, I was the CTO at a fintech company called Tellurium. So that did market data for energy traders. And before that, I was the CTO at a hedge fund. It was a small one, but it did different asset classes in different markets. So it was a great experience. I really enjoyed it. I think kind of altogether, I just fundamentally love learning new things in new areas. And obviously in software development, that means languages, technologies. What I'm trying to do with PureType is, uh, you know, move some of that knowledge that I have, the approaches that I use to learn things and kind of give people a sense of progress each day into a product that other people can use there. And really, when it comes to professional software developers, it's all about learning as easily as possible alongside their work. So currently in the process of sort of selling the first few licenses there. It's an exciting time, and it's nice to know that the months spent in research and reading and developing are going to some good end, I guess.
Yeah, it feels like a stark contrast going from fintech to education,
Yeah.
right? So how did you decide to make that transition? Did you find like this massive problem that needed solving and then you decided to switch, or it was just yeah, you try something out? How did you make that decision?
It's a good question because it is quite a change, obviously from finance and fintech to edtech, essentially. So what I had in my previous job was bringing people up to speed in a language called Elixir. And it's a pretty powerful language, but it's also still kind of a niche one. It forces people to think in a different way. They're quite slow when they start, and then
Mhm.
then they become quite effective afterwards. So it's a sense of bringing people up to speed in so many ways. Sort of taught me a lot about how to teach people, and it's the idea of investing time in people, giving them feedback, following up with them to make sure that they understood the idea well. There, all of those ideas appear in PureType. So it was a team of 6, but by the time I left, all of them were, I would say, pretty proficient in Elixir. And it's obviously something that happens across the board, but I think it can be done in a much more automated fashion and leave the high level development stuff, the stuff that people don't actually have time for a lot of the time, to the people on the job itself. Leave the low level stuff to automatic reviewers, to exercises that people can do, and I think that helps everybody.
Yeah, that's cool. I didn't know like there are folks that use Elixir for
Yeah.
like development. I mean, I only see it as a programming language. You know, when you see the iceberg, where it's like the top, you have maybe JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and then towards the bottom, where it's like deep blue, you see
Oh, yeah.
Elixir, F sharp. Like some brain freeze. That's
Yeah.
where I see those.
The iceberg definitely goes deeper than that. I could definitely
Yeah.
link a couple of things.
I,
It's good because it's the right size of community. It's not too large, and then obviously I'll expand into other bigger languages above the waterline afterwards. See how it
yeah.
goes. Yeah.
So, that's it. How, first of all, how was it like working at a hedge fund as a CTO? Is it like big bucks? Because I mean, you see, like it's a lot of money flowing through. I'm reading this book. It's More Money Than God. It's about hedge funds of like in 1980s and coming. I don't know if they got to like Bill Ackman yet, but I'm still like at the start. And I'm hearing like the amount of money, like billions, that flows through these organizations. And these are like hedge funds of like the 80s. So is that still the same? And how was it like working in tech at a hedge fund? I've heard finance bros are like, that's where it's at. So how's that? How's that experience?
Yeah, there's a few things to unpick there. I think one for me was the markets, the hot markets, change from decade to decade. So in the 80s, it's that sense of junk bonds were a big factor then, and then the 90s were equities and tech up until the tech boom. When I was coming in, it was the end of the financial crisis, but there was still a lot of high frequency trading being done. In fact, we still had to go and ride that wave. And the kind of folks that go into high frequency trading are the kind of people who are into science and engineering. So unfortunately, it's not very much like the Wolf of Wall Street. I know that would have been a more entertaining route to go down.
Yeah.
But what you lack in that, you make up for in the fact that we were trading the US, Europe, and Japan, and it was a group of about 10 of us. So it was always on, but you felt like you were connected to all these different equity markets in the world, trading these really elaborate strategies. And, if we're managing outside money, we would make a fair bit of return. But it was a fairly independent way of working. It wasn't like a lot of other bigger hedge funds would be, where you're sort of in this very very small niche. You're just kind of looking at a couple of stocks, you're analyzing them to death, and then you just keep on doing the same thing day after day. If we found something that was a big return, we'd go do it, and then we'd go look at something else right afterwards. That it was nice and free. It was a lot of hard work. We had to buy the hardware. We had to, because it was high frequency trading, a lot of the edge is in the technology. So obviously spending a lot of time looking into how that gets improved and a whole bunch of things. So it was definitely a fantastic experience. I just wonder if it's the same nowadays. Obviously the world moves on from that. I don't know what the current trend is now, but I wonder if tech guys can get into it. AI probably.
Could you in like just a little bit, because I'm very curious, right? Talk about what high frequency trading is. Because when I hear high frequency trading, I assume you're trading like on the difference in maybe not dollars but the difference in the spread doesn't have to be like a lot, and that's it. And you just do that millions of times, maybe. Well, in your opinion, what's like high frequency trading?
So there's a couple of strategies you can do. One of them is where you're the market maker. They call it liquidity provision, but they come up with a complicated term for everything that's people have a simpler thing for. So when you're market making, you're the guy that people are buying from on the bid or the offer. I don't know if you come across those two things. And those seem to shift up and down all the time. It's kind of impossible to keep track of. So back in the day, that would be traders on the floor. Or, you'd go to them and they would, that's the price at which you do with the trade. Now, virtually every exchange, apart from the New York Stock Exchange, has gotten rid of those humans. So all of this bid and offer kind of moving up and down is done by computers. So you at each price level, that's like 5, 10, 15 cents, you have to be the first order in the queue, because that's what the other order will come in and hit. That's how you both orders match, and that's how you get a trade afterwards. So you have to be really clever, about how quick you are at getting to the front of the queue, or putting yourself in a position where you'll be the front of the queue. And the second is, there's nothing to stop the price rising like 10% or going down 10%, and suddenly, exactly, you're kind of left holding the bag, because you've got, you traded with somebody and then it just went right through that price level as well. So there's a lot of maths involved in that. The people who do this kind of bid offer market making stuff are very interested in how the order book, the whole list of orders works, and the way it's structured and everything else like that. So that was kind of cool to see people dive into that. But that's just one of many different strategies you can run. That was one that we did pretty well in Europe for example.
Yeah. I can imagine that when you trade the US, Europe, and Japanese markets, you don't sleep. Yeah, because when one market closes, the other opens, and you're on.
Well, fortunately, I think we got to the stage. There was definitely a time where we were trading just Europe, and then it was Europe and US, and then it was Europe and US and Japan. And you can believe that when we started doing Japan, we were definitely searching for ways to make it earlier on in the day. So we managed to get it to like 6:30, 7 o'clock, essentially Japanese midnight plus 30 minutes there. So once we did that, first of all, we got much better night's sleep, but you could just switch on a whole bunch of things, switch it on and just let it trade overnight. So that was kind of cool seeing that all the way through. And I remember writing a script that if it ever misbehaved, that it would put together a little audio message and then just ring a phone number and repeat that audio message to the person. So if you were just waking up, you at least, you can't really read anything, right? At least a couple of seconds after waking up, but you can hold the phone to your ear and just figure out what the hell's going on. So that was cool. Fortunately, I think that only ever triggered once, but that's kind of, it's nice to see all those bits of tech play together. And obviously, the world of tech has moved on, voice recognition, etc. But that was like 10 years ago. That was kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. That sounds really cool, and I assume the adrenaline would be like off the charts when you do something like that, even if it's like automated.
Yeah,
I mean, you have to watch it still and just see where the market is moving.
Yeah, and I think that you're right there. It's this angle of you can't just go, let's see how it goes. I don't think, I'm not sure if it works, but hey, I'll just give it a try and what'll happen. Like every mistake is punished so much. If you get around to reading it, stuff like Night Capital and how that went under in just a couple, 1 hour, 50 minutes or something ridiculous like that. Yeah, mistakes cost a lot of money. So learning stuff well, executing stuff well, definitely worth the time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. Speaking of learning stuff well, let's talk about PureType. Could you tell us a bit about what PureType is and what the problem you're solving with it is?
So the way I see it, it's two different trends. One is this idea of having much more powerful tools. So instead of spending 8 hours literally just coding away at something, we can come up, thanks to AI and the various ways in which it helps, writing new stuff is not the bottleneck anymore. So I see understanding what it is, how it works, feeling capable in it, that's going to be a new bottleneck. And the second is, that the team knowledge is going to be such a bottleneck as well. If you don't know stuff, then you're not going to be able to do stuff. It's this sense of we are going to run into issues soon where we give junior developers essentially a fighter jet to fly on their first day. And it's a really powerful tool, but you can definitely crash it pretty quickly there. So thinking about how we learn stuff, doing it well, is going to become even more important. We'll build even more complex systems that will be even harder to explain. What I'm seeing with PureType is, let's try and break it down. Let's try and go through each area, turn them into little modules, a bit like how you have on Duolingo or something like that, and just focus on getting that stuff right. And then if you can track how they're doing in all of these different parts, then you can start to link them together. And we understand how learning works. People graduate with degrees in education. We can actually make them learn in a much more structured and quicker fashion than we ever could, because we have the technology to do this now. We've got machine learning, we've got AI to help with question generation, for example. Let's actually take advantage of that, and then we can leave the 2010s behind where we just copied stuff from Stack Overflow and hoped it worked. Let's get serious about learning and see where that can take us.
Yeah. So does PureType facilitate this? this sounds like the problem that it solves. So how does it
Yeah.
solve this problem? You have like a
Yeah.
platform, an
Yeah. That's
MOC with like questions. How does it also integrate with, your day-to-day, work environment? I think that's also the value proposition with
yeah.
PureType is you could learn on the job. So how
Yeah.
does that work?
How does that work? So it's an AI powered coach. It's giving you feedback on the code itself, at a slightly high level. There, and then it's the follow up. I spotted that you were making mistakes X, Y, and Z. Therefore, you need to learn about this subject. And if you learn about it well, then you should no longer make mistakes X, Y, and Z after a while. So having that, what I would say is a feedback cycle. Make the mistake, learn how not to make it again. You can then follow up with somebody and say they've actually learned this. They're moving on to other things. They're making other sorts of mistakes now, but they're actually learning. And I think that's something we miss in totally every bit of other educational software is we almost don't pay attention to the actual output of developers. We just, take a look at, we sort of say, go for this course, and then just hope that they remember everything after the end of this course. I think that kind of fixed linear course, the days of that are numbered to some extent.
Yeah. Yeah, that does make sense. I do know that feedback loop. I think that's something that's missing in education in general.
Yeah.
Is we're all told go to school, learn stuff, peace. You go
Yeah.
figure it out,
Yeah.
it out in real life, and you see maybe it's different, maybe it's the same if you're lucky, or you
Yeah.
just keep learning and hopefully you remember stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah, to your point, with there being like AI tools now, so that feedback loop can actually be embedded in, can actually be progressive learning, right?
Yeah.
So you can learn as you do.
Yeah. And I think it's probably you and I, something that we share in common is we're both curious. We actually like learning. It's just that school doesn't encourage curiosity. It's this fixed syllabus where you have to know subjects A, B, and C. You pass the exam, you hope you get above a certain mark, and then you move on. Like that's never happened. But professional work is totally different, and it doesn't matter whether you're a software developer or a lawyer, you have to learn 1,000 different things every day. And then you're hoping that you get feedback and you're hoping you've learned stuff from that. But obviously, if you're too busy, there's always some deadline. In the case of developers, there's a daily catch up to present progress at, or a weekly sprint that they need to start completing. So getting to the stage where they think, okay, I might not have a day to sit down and learn this course, even if it were useful. I'm going to at least spend 5, 10, 15 minutes, but I know that 5, 10, 15 minutes has been broken down into exactly the length that I need to learn this well and to get the practice and then get the feedback later on.
Yeah, that's really cool. When you talk about curiosity, I think that's something a lot of people miss out on. I suffered that myself. After school, did a lot of like software engineering, wrote a bunch of code. I studied chemical engineering and I really liked it. And but then I felt at some point I lost all forms of like curiosity. I was just like doing this like input, output.
Yeah.
Little creativity. I wasn't thinking a lot. And I had to like take a step back and be like, okay, so like what do I do? Like how do I fix this? And I think the fix for me was finding fiction, like hard fiction books that would just get you to like imagine stuff and think.
Yeah.
That was what I read. I read a couple of them, and then I think I started seeing the world in like it was like I was on something. That I see the world differently. Right, asking better questions and questioning things. So yes, I definitely agree with you that the curiosity is missing from school, and that's something that also we need to find a way to bring into the workplace. So
Yeah.
with PureType, what's the delivery method? Is it like a platform? Is this a plugin that sits in your code editor? How does that work? What's a way to use it?
Of course. So it's two different bits. It's the plugin that's giving you feedback. So that's either in your IDE or in GitHub or whatever platform you use for code review. So that's the one half of it. The second is a web platform. And I know at this point, people aren't going to log in daily to it, unless I have some annoying owl like Duolingo does that reminds people. But that's the bit that has well, okay, here are your top 3 modules to study. And you might go, okay, I haven't got 15 minutes now, but I've got time for a 5-minute exercise on this subject. Let me go do it. And then complete that area and then see how I look at the rest of my things. I'm coming up with this idea of a knowledge heat map. How much do I know and how much am I familiar with and how much could I possibly know afterwards there. So to recap, like IDE feedback, that's a plugin, and a web platform, that's the actual learning, the follow-up material that you get, the more modular exercises that you can do.
Oh, okay. Are there any transformations so far that you've seen with users and folks that have shared like something and said, hey, this has been like really good?
No specific examples, but the people I have had as early pilot users, because I completed a pilot in August to September, they gave me good feedback on the way that the learning worked. Because it's really easy to look at it and go, okay, let's try and break it down into an incredibly small thing. Let's just complete a question or complete a bit of reading. It turns out that's a really boring way to learn, because that gives you no excitement at all. You don't know what's coming up. It doesn't give you any focus, because you just end up answering questions from question A, area A, area B, area C, etc. And you can't really gather anything from it. You don't have enough practice to really stop making whatever mistake it might be after that. So asking me again in a month or two, and I'm sure I'll have life-changing experiences, and they'll feel so much more successful for it. But it's great to get that feedback, and it's great to figure out how we can make learning interesting. In that sense, I failed to make it interesting, but I'm hoping to now, which is good.
Yeah, that's super cool. I'm looking forward to that. Something I want to get your thoughts on is AI and learning for engineers. So everyone that writes any form of code, even those that do not, have tried Cursor. And I use SourceGraph Cody, for instance. Also really cool with Claude Sonnet 3.5. So I use that. And for instance, I do not write code as much as I used to, but I want to try Next.js's app router. Normally, I would go read the documentation, figure out how it works, why it was built that way, and what are some of like maybe even trade-offs, or what are its strengths. But with Cursor or Cody, I don't have to do any of that. No form of learning. I want to set up an app, like I want to build it like maybe a micro app or even something good like we use at Hackmamba, an internal tool. And I can get, so far I've realized I'm able to get like 80% of the way until the tool loses context, and then I'm stuck. I'm like, I'm like,
what's going on?
What's going on? What if I need to change something? What do I do? If I open another like window or start another chat, it doesn't have enough context as the previous one. And I'm like, I've abandoned one project that was seemingly going well because of that. Right. And I do know a lot of developers will fall into that trap of spending the first, they're able to get their apps off the ground, get it some way, get something maybe usable, but then learning the other way, like knowing what to do next. If it breaks, how to fix it, right? I feel like that could be a problem. And because we're rewarded with a working app at the beginning, maybe we don't see the need to go actually learn new stuff and learn like why this thing works this way. So I want to get your take on that. Do you see that as a problem that's coming, or that's irrelevant because people just want to maybe build stuff, get it out there, sell, indie hackers make money, and then just make another thing. But if you want to really be an engineer, probably a junior engineer that wants to grow like their career, but they use Cursor, for instance, and it's good. What are your thoughts around personal development and learning for that?
It's absolutely something I've thought a lot about this year. So the way I see this AI enhanced editing, stuff like Cursor, sitting down, and then you're doing it 10 times the pace as you were before. I can draw a lot of parallels between no code and that set of tooling, especially in the late 2010s, and this idea of perhaps in some languages of just having a wizard or a framework generator. Here's all the stuff. Here you go. It took you just a command, but now you've got a working web app. Now, that's obviously a very simplistic example, but that happened like 10, 15 years ago. We started making JavaScript frameworks, and you could get some pretty complicated things going pretty quickly. The big hurdle is it doesn't work, or I need to edit it. And at that point, you move away from that wonderful cycle of I'm creating it, I'm seeing it, I'm creating it, I'm seeing it. It's a great sort of train to ride until you hit this stop of, okay, I've got all of this, but either it's grown too complex now, and you're making a point about there being too much context for any of the AI models to swallow, or I simply don't understand if what's being suggested is correct. So I think the further along you go in a software project, the higher that chance happens that things can go south, or you get into this state where things go wrong pretty regularly, but you can't kind of fit things together, or you end up with something that's much more complex than it should be. And I think that's the point at which your understanding is tested. You aren't just writing it never to look at it again. You actually have to figure out, okay, well, where does this new thing that I want to build slot in? I want to build this new feature, or I want to make this faster in this respect. These kind of questions are pretty critical for any kind of senior staff lead developer, but you don't have to answer them straight away when you start something. So I'll go back to my analogy of stuffing junior developers into fighter planes. Or it's like learning to drive in a sports car. Sports cars are great. You can get anywhere pretty quickly, but they are pretty powerful things. And judging by the amount that people end up sort of, crashing them when they shouldn't, it gives you the sense that they're pretty powerful, but there isn't much of a safety mechanism. There isn't much feedback, and therefore you can do a lot. You can do a lot of damage with something that you don't understand. And I think that's a great analogy for a lot of things in life, frankly.
Yeah. Do you think that would affect the quality of developers in, say, the next 5 to 10 years? Obviously, there will be standout developers, folks that, people building the AI tools, for instance, they'll always be relevant, right? But then there are application developers, like most of us. I spent most of my development time building apps, haven't touched like lower level code. So what then happens to the quality of application developers if you could just build anything? Are you still a developer, or are you an instructor? It's what I started thinking.
Yeah, and it's an existential question, right? At that point, you're thinking, did I waste all of my time doing that when I could have wasted a couple of years and something else could have done it for me? I think quality-wise, we are in a dangerous position, and you can see it almost. I know 2024 has been a strange year for developer hiring, but it's been especially bad and strange for junior developers. I really don't envy anybody who's trying to get a job in this market, because nobody has the capacity to train you. There's very little feedback going on. Now, obviously, my angle is going to be, well, hey, let's give more feedback, at least help people understand, prompt them, give them some structure like an educational course does, but don't funnel them into a standard educational syllabus. Actually, allow them a point in the day, even if it's 5-10 minutes, to reflect on what they've done and actually figure out how things are working. So I think I think there'll be good developers. I think there are people who are always curious, and I think that's always a pretty human attribute to have. I think people are also lazy, so I think those two are always fighting. Those are impulses are things we're always fighting, aren't we? I'm just hoping that the curiosity will win over the laziness, but who knows?
Yeah, you're right. Who knows? I really feel for junior developers, because everywhere on Twitter, LinkedIn, everyone just talks about, who needs junior developers anymore? Because there are tools out there that are better on a base level than a junior developer that writes, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and some React.js at the moment.
And if I can interject there, I think the nature of being a junior developer will change, and I think that will then change how senior leads go. It's not going to be this sense of work on this small component. I've told you what to do, and then and how to do it. And as a junior developer, you just need to go and figure out, all the steps required to finish the how. I think they're going to go up a level, and I think there's going to be here's what to do, and then you should know enough about the language that the AI can help you work out the how. But it's your work; you better understand it before you go and submit it. So it's going to feel a bit strange to anybody that was a junior developer before that happened, but it's going to be a lot less prescriptive. It'll actually be, I think, a bit more free as a junior developer, because you won't have such strong opinions about how stuff should be done from other potential people with a mistaken approach to things. You'll be able to query it and edit it as well. So see how it goes over the next couple of years for sure.
Well, I do know for sure everyone will be required to think deeper about anything, junior, senior. The deeper you can think and answer why, and help get the team or the product around a why. Like, why are we building this? Why are we building this feature? I think that's going to be more important than how the feature is built, because anything would probably build, and the cost of actually building is just nose diving by the day. It's super cheap these days. It feels like it's almost going to be free to have an AI agent that's a junior developer soon. Maybe before the end of mid next year, you could have a junior developer that's just some AI agent running on Anthropic, Claude, or OpenAI, and it just works.
Oh yeah, I've definitely seen a couple of startups that do that, or are hoping to do that at least. And there's another angle, which is programming is just getting higher and higher level. Back in the 80s, people were working assembler. Nobody knows assembler now, frankly. Then there was C, C++, and then we moved on to JavaScript and functional languages, and we're just moving one level higher, where it's almost as if the exact language doesn't matter anymore, but you need to know how to read it and understand the output there. So that you could look at it from that angle and then say, okay, well, it's just like the fourth or fifth generation of languages. That just requires a different skill set. You no longer need to know about the hardware. You just need to think about things at a really high level. But we were going that way anyway with things like JavaScript frameworks that you could say display, have a create, retrieve, update, delete interface for this particular table, and you could just write it in a couple of lines of code. Almost, you could say that's its own high level thing there. You didn't need to know how any of those bits worked there. So I think it's just generalizing that concept almost.
Yeah, true. Well, this just emphasizes how much more important developer education is on the job, because it's easy to just lose focus with whatever is out there, and then wake up one morning and you're obsolete. Like you're out of a job, and it. You're just not signed out yet. You just not contributed anymore. So everyone needs to stay. At least in the car. I like to say, you don't want to be left out. Even if you're not in the driver's seat or the passenger seat, just be in the trunk. Don't be left out. Just keep moving. Be in the car somehow.
You're going somewhere.
Definitely, learning definitely puts you on that path, at least, even if you're not doing, and knowing is important. I want to get to the next bit, which basically is you've built PureType. How are you going to market? What are some of the things you've tried? What has worked? And what have you failed at as well?
Yep. So as background, I'm bootstrapped. I'm a sole founder, and obviously that's as tricky as it gets. I haven't got any marketing or sales background in particular. So I think one angle is thinking, okay, well, I need to be super efficient about what I do. It's a sense I can't really afford to, pay for link building, for example, in a couple of $1,000 as some bigger companies might. What can I do that's free or pretty close to free that can help actually grow the presence, the awareness there? So I think there's really been two principles. It's that sense of failing fast. If I might pay for an advertising campaign on LinkedIn, but you can better believe that the little slider is all the way down at the bottom. If it's going to run for a week, I'm going to see, is it worth running ads in the future at this scale? How does it work? Is it capturing people who want to buy? So I think failing fast, experimenting fast is one. And then the second is, what's the actual differentiator? Because the world doesn't need another blog that just explains some concept that everyone's aware of already. And the trouble with education and knowledge sharing is that there are a lot of concepts that people are aware of. Things like pair programming. Don't need a blog article on pair programming because that's been around for a very long time. So trying to have enough of an opinion and then the right channels, free channels to push that through. So I wrote a couple of articles around Elixir, actually problems I suffered while I was working through PureType. And I thought, you know what will make a better developer if I write about this and then I send it off to some marketing channels. In this case, Elixir has, I think, Elixir status. And you can just say, well, I wrote this and it turns up in like 4 or 5 different newsletters. Great. That's like a real spike in traffic. 10% of them might click through to the marketing site. 1% of them might start a free trial or somewhere along those lines. So, all that's taken is my time. Well, not to ram AI into the conversation, but there's no longer that fear of the blank page. You can get a pretty good outline going, but you have to have an opinion. It can't just be informational. It can't be something that I can just capture in a Perplexity page. I need to know about what your, what my take on it is, and it has to be a fairly unique one. So I think those two things, marketing-wise and sales-wise, those have really helped. Sales-wise, that kind of moves on to positioning. I've been looking at Daniel Herbert's founder system, but he has a good sense of bringing technical founders from 0 to 1. He also follows his own course, which I think is always key in anybody who's teaching something. That sense of what are all the things that are required to sell well? It's good positioning, it's good messaging. He breaks it down quite nicely in a way that's easy to understand, especially someone with an engineering mindset. You kind of want to say, what are all the big blocks? How does each block work? Let me work on each block. Let me stack them together, and I've got sales now. So really learning a lot about that. I've grown to appreciate, especially in this end of the sales market, how systematic sales and marketing are. They are data-driven. You come up with these different ideas, these different hypotheses, and then you try to work out if they're any good or, what have they actually failed, or do they still need time to succeed there too? So that's, if I can sum up sort of 8 months or 9 months of mistakes and wrong directions and spending hours and hours of reading stuff, then I think that would be the way to go. If I could tell myself that in March, boy, I would have saved a huge amount of time. So
yeah, that's great. I love the idea of failing fast. I think when I find technical founders or just technical folks building stuff, I think failing fast applies to just the product. And then I think of it also with distribution. They typically pick a distribution channel and then they just stick with it without realizing that, you try stuff, it works, you keep it. If it doesn't work, you need to embrace experiments, like I see, and have time experiments. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, move on and just go to the go to the next thing, especially in the early days.
There's that thinker Rory Sutherland, I'll post the link on for others later, where he talks about capitalism not being a efficiency machine. Everyone thinks, okay, well, it's the guy who sells the widgets makes them the cheapest and sells them for the most. He makes the most money. No, capitalism's actually a discovery machine. You want to figure out what works, and you want to put aside enough money to work out whether it does or not. But thinking in terms of efficiency across the board, that's a very Soviet way of working. I'm going to do this. I'm never going to change it. I just want to make this as efficient as possible. That is thinking that will then be out of date in 5-10 years. And I think we're seeing increasingly that people are okay with failure, that they're happy to experiment. But if you don't understand what you're experimenting, or worse, you don't even care, then that's the point at which you're going to fail. And I think we're going to see a lot of management thinking, business thinking switch towards that too.
Yeah. I also, again, thinking about artificial intelligence, reducing the moat in development. So right now I say you really don't have an edge with your application. If you build an application, someone could wake up tomorrow, they just need to use your application and they most likely rebuild a version of it that they can go to market with.
Yeah.
So modes do not exist so much. You don't have like so much of that in application development. Previously, you would build a product, and at least you have maybe a year or two before someone else comes up with something, like you get like a strong competitor. Now you build something, especially with like building public and
Yeah.
um, launching fast and getting to market quickly. As you're getting market quickly, someone else is trying to go even quicker. So we have to turn to
Yeah.
something else, right? We
Yeah.
need to look someplace else for like where'd you get the edge. And so far, I've seen it's
Yeah.
in go to market.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's in distribution, how you go to market and how you do it. Obviously, I've started seeing a lot of folks that are shilling go to market strategies.
Yeah.
Um, Different people like saying, "Hey, here's this playbook of how I made 555 million in 1 month," and yeah, just send me a DM and I'll
Yeah.
show you how exactly I did it. Or here's this thread how I did it.
Yeah. But somehow I still need to earn more money after all of that, you know.
Yeah, exactly. You still need to like make money after making a couple 100,000 each month in MRR. So I see
Yes.
those, like obviously folks need to like people need to sieve through all those and pick out like what makes sense and what doesn't. But yeah,
Yeah.
um having a moat in distribution, having an edge in distribution is certainly important, and experiments are definitely top one way to get there. So
Yeah.
if you did look back, what would you say is like your biggest failure? So the thing that you'd be like, I would never try this, right? Like I wouldn't try this again, at least not in the near future, or at least in the midterm.
I think I thought about VC funding quite early on. And I thought, okay, I need a pre-seed. If I'm going to make this attractive enough, maybe it is I need to find that moat early on. I
Mhm.
thought, okay, I'm going to try and write that. I'll write the slide deck, pitch deck, get in contact with a couple of people. But then you realize it's more than a full-time job to do that. And
Yeah,
the best, most dilutive funding you can ever get is customer revenue. And of course, we're at a stage where getting from 0 to 1, leaving aside 1 and up, is cheaper than ever before for SaaS, for things where you just need to write some code. You've got some idea there. So I think there is a moat in terms of the network, but I think you're right to say that the main moat is marketing and coming across as a founder well. So I wish I had spent less time on thinking, okay, well, how am I going to fund this, range, how's it going to scale, and more on just make sure when people think more developer education, and people think of PureType when they think of developer education too. So things obviously I'm still learning a lot about, but it's those kind of distractions where you don't need the permission from somebody else to go ahead. You just need to go and do it, experiment, and learn along the way there too. I could have saved probably 3 or 4
yeah,
weeks on that, I think, total this year.
yeah. Well, I guess I need to ask you this question now, and I want to get your
Sure.
opinion, which is, if you had to pick between building a really good product with shitty marketing, or building a decent product, maybe poor, so still rough around the edges, but you have great marketing and great distribution,
Yeah.
which would you pick?
I actually think that's an easier answer than I thought it was going to be. I think it's the latter, because I think if you in something like education, you have to care about the market. It's not like a component of a nuclear power station where if you have the best product, then people will use it. There's such an obvious edge to doing so, and relative moat perhaps there. Here, if you can always build a better product later, but if the marketing side of things works, then there's this whole other ecosystem that comes with it. Something like Duolingo has its own culture associated with the whole
Yeah,
owl. That's kind of something to have. That's uh, kind of immaterial there, and that's obviously a big component of what something like Duolingo is. And so, if I was hoping to do any of that, it would be to try and recreate that culture around the company or the products, rather than say, okay, well, it's 10 or 20% better at teaching you. After a while, I think people don't care about that kind of marginal gain.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You're right. I like the fact that you stated use the nuclear power plant
Yeah.
example, because it's pretty subjective unless you have something that you know this is like an absolute necessity,
Mm.
um, and you have a whole lot of edge. Like if you build like a nuclear power plant, you don't just go around and see a nuclear power plant on every street. You have maybe one in the city. Some countries don't
Yeah,
even have any. So if you build
that's right.
one, if you build something like that, either software, hardware, infrastructure,
Yeah.
then you could say, okay, I'm just going to build a great product, and I know users will find me, just like OpenAI did with um, ChatGPT, and it quickly went on to be like the fastest. I think it's the most downloaded app, or the
Mm.
yeah, yeah, the app with the fastest growth in a day or a week. But
Yeah, sort of fastest
irrespective of
growth to
it,
100 million users. Yeah, looked at like
yeah,
other back in the day, 15 years to reach that kind of number.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But I have I have a theory that
Mm.
if OpenAI didn't exist, they didn't launch ChatGPT then. If they try to do that now, I don't think they would get to such numbers. They get to such numbers. I mean, the product was pretty like revolutionary. Yeah,
Yeah.
the first of its kind. But just imagine the landscape at the moment, and someone comes and says, "Hey, we have this new chat, like this AI chat app we've built that runs on GPT-5."
Mm.
I don't think they'll get the same, the same vibe and the same adoption,
Yeah.
rapid adoption as they had when they did. So even that note is gone.
Yeah. And a lot of those original users were signing up just to test it, just to see, okay,
Yeah,
I'm just going to type in a thread or so of information, and then they never used it again. But it was still this step forward for them. It needed to
Mhm.
be packaged up in a different way, perhaps, but there is, I think, a lot of, we'll maybe look back at the last decade and think, okay, well, what's the point of being first? Because somebody will just come along and they'll be much more better funded than you, and it will just be this mad dash for market share. And I wonder if that picture is beginning to change, where it's a bit about ingenuity. It's about being, okay, I never linked A and B together. Let's see what that can do for my workflow. And then you just capture every, corner of the market straight away because people are so enthused about it. It's there, and
yeah,
nobody cares about marginal differences or whether something or pricing or anything else like that, because all of these things that are now possible there, you can get a much bigger return by selling it, etc. So that's kind
yeah,
of a very long-winded way of saying it's a new world. Maybe in some areas it's this post-scarcity. We're no longer thinking about, is this cheaper than that? We're thinking about, well, it links A, B, and C together, and nothing else does.
does that? Yeah, you're
Yeah,
right. Before I see we're up on time, but I have one more question,
yeah, go
which
for it.
is which is looking at everything that you've done now. What would you feel, you've tried a lot of things? What would you feel is the most impactful? If you had to keep something, right? What would that be?
Is that just PureType or across my entire career, or is that too big a question?
I think we could broaden that and make it like across your career, because everything so far has led to PureType and what it is and what you do now, who you are. So
Yeah,
across your career.
yeah. I think it's been the managing people aspect. I think I've come a long way from somebody, and I think most people start like this, who thought, okay, management's just task list management, right? You just have to tell someone what to do, and it's been great to travel along that to, well, if you coach people well, you almost get them to be totally independent, totally effective, without having to really point them in a particular direction. They almost become an equal in that sense. Uh, they become really motivated. They sort of share that same love of being able to do stuff, being really curious. That's something. If I was to pick out anything, that's definitely been a rewarding angle for me, and obviously that shows through in the type of work I'm trying to do now.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
that's great. Definitely people, like managing people. I think after sales is like the hardest thing I've done, not engineering,
Yeah.
not writing. Sales and marketing. Uh, After that, it's people, managing people, hiring, helping others do better.
Yeah.
That's next level. Like it's crazy, and it can make or break your organization. You could just mess things up, or you could just shoot up like overnight.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and I think that's the force multiplier of it all. But it's like a system. It's not a system in the sense it has, widgets and different connecting parts. It's a system in the sense you can kind of, it works every day, but you can improve it. You can observe it, see what's going wrong, how it can be improved, and working in a company of people. Yeah, that's a system to some extent. But I definitely agree with your ordering. Sales and marketing for me,
Yep.
the building bit's simple now. So what's the differentiator? It's those.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember reading this book. I think it's Good to Great,
Hmm.
where the author talks about how building an organization that would go from good to great, you need to
Yeah.
have great people first, then you find something you're passionate about. So some problem, and then that's the flywheel. You just keep spinning and making sure like the process works. But
Yeah.
people come first. And I think that's something that's changed my mentality about building a company or leading
Yeah.
people or just thinking about an organization is, yeah, the problem can wait. The solution we're trying to put together can wait, but the people
Yeah.
come first. Because if the
Yeah.
people come last, we're screwed.
Yeah. And I think any organization that forgets that, and there's so many big companies out there at the moment they think, running a public company is just a big financial optimization problem. If you forget about the people, then suddenly things go south pretty quickly. You're sort of a dead man walking, but I
Yeah,
think that's the end of most organizations.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. Um, well, we've come to the end of this. This has been so much fun. Do you have
Yeah.
any last words for for folks listening to this? Obviously, everyone should check out PureType.
Yes, they
If you're a
should.
developer and you don't want to be left out in the dust, you should be checking out PureType. But any other last words from your end, Matt?
No, I think I agree with your last point. People can change. People are most important, and I look forward to building an organization and a approach where that's the case. So, yeah, I'm really interested to hear from anybody using it. It's definitely at the early stage, and there's definitely feedback that can be incorporated. But I love to hear it, and I'd love to hear from those people.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Matt. And thanks to anyone listening to this. And that's today's episode of Everything Outside Code.
Absolutely. I had a
Cheers.
wonderful time. Cheers.
Cheers.